Hello, I'm Murray Herbst, Director of Entrepreneurship for UTS. RegTech is an amazing area. So regulatory technology, for anyone that doesn't know, it's a super broad area, lots of money being spent, but also I think most importantly, lots of opportunity to improve people's lives, companies' efficiency, government efficiency, and this outcomes across the board. It's a really interesting area and worth understanding a lot better. So, in today's video, you're going to hear from leaders in the RegTech space in Australia, talking about the current state of what's happening and what's coming up as well, which I think is quite exciting. Deborah Young, CEO of the RegTech Association, who does incredible work. Deborah, you're amazing. And I'm going to stay here grabbing people off the street and helping them understand what RegTech is, and hopefully watch this video on an important topic. Enjoy. Over to you, Deborah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Deborah Young, and I'm the CEO of the RegTech Association, and I'm here to talk you through the 101 of RegTech. A little about what we're going to cover today, about the RTA and the work that we do. We're going to talk about trust. We're going to talk about what is RegTech and the benefits, who's in the ecosystem, how do we categorise RegTech, and what is the taxonomy. We're going to talk about bringing real tools to real people, and how are we tracking in Australia? What does the data tell us? And then finally, we're going to bust a few myths and the most misunderstood parts of RegTech. So let's get started. The RegTech Association was established in 2017 as a non-profit industry association community, and we've grown quickly to about 170 organisations worldwide. And what we do simply is that we lead engagement and collaboration between the different parts of our ecosystem, such as regulators, institutions, government, and technology companies. And we do this through the programs that we run, the events that we run, the research that we do, some of the consulting work that we do, and finally to work with trade organisations to amplify export opportunities for members. But where I really wanted to start this conversation was to talk about trust and how RegTech plays such an important role in bringing trust to everyone everywhere. And I think if we take our student hats off or our business hats off for a second and just think about that in our dealings with those in the community that we deal with on a daily basis, we will assume that there is trust in place. And so that might be you dealing with your energy company or your telco, or perhaps your bank, and you would assume that there is trust in place. And RegTech plays a very important role in bringing the layer of trust into those service providers. The RegTech companies can provide those services to those providers to bring trust to consumers, and that means you and me. So let's start with the definition though. What is RegTech? RegTech is short for regulatory technology, and it's the application of different kinds of technologies to improve the way that businesses can manage their regulation and compliance. And we don't just mean regulation and compliance in one specific industry. RegTech can be applied to any regulated industry at all. Here are some of the things that RegTech is. We see RegTech as an enabler and as an accelerator. It is not a disruptor in the way that some other forms of technology can disrupt incumbent firms. More we say that this enables all companies everywhere to do a better job of their regulation and compliance. One of the important hallmarks of RegTechs as well is that they're usually founded by experienced industry practitioners who spent many years actually working in the industry, such as in banking, it might be in regulation, could have been in a service provider such as a law firm or a professional services firm. So they really have a deep understanding of the risks that are addressed firsthand through having lived it through lived experience. RegTech can also be sector agnostic in terms of how it's applied, so any regulated industry at all. And it's also technology agnostic, so it may use different forms of technology such as blockchain, distributed ledgers, natural language processing, or artificial intelligence, just to name a few. And you may also hear the word SupTech or SupTech, and this really stands for supervisory technology. And it's the same underlying RegTech technology, but usually used by a regulator, i.e., which is where the word supervisor comes from. So what does RegTech actually bring? Well, it brings productivity and efficiency and the lowering of costs. So instead of throwing more people at the problem, you can throw a tech solution that can do the work of many, many people. And I've already underlined the importance of the increased safety and confidence that this brings. And who is in the ecosystem? So we have the RegTech companies themselves. We have all types of regulated entities, and the most well-known are probably the banks and financial institutions. Then we have the regulators. Then we have government, other large technology firms. Startup accelerators and incubators also play an important role. Science and research organisations at the very early stages of working on the tech. The media play a very important role to amplify our messages and get the news out there. And then finally, our allied affiliate industry bodies, who we have a close relationship with a number of them around the world. So when I talk about the ecosystem, this is what I'm referring to. Now, RegTech taxonomy and the language of RegTech, this is very important. When we first founded the association, we felt that there were many different ways that people were referring to exactly the same thing. So we developed our own RegTech taxonomy, and this takes a risk-based approach. And you'll see on the left-hand side of this slide, all of the risks addressed by our taxonomy. And whilst it has many filters, on the right, you can see one of those additional filters, which is the functional role. In other words, this is the risk that it addressed on the left, and on the right, this is the role that it actually performs and what it does. And there are many, many more filters that you can find for free on our RegTech member directory on our website, www.regtech.org.au, if you would like to learn more. Real tools for real people. Now, this is absolutely key. So when we're talking about all of these RegTech tools that can address all the risks that were on the previous slide, who are those tools actually for? Well, we've heard that they benefit consumers in the long run, but actually the most immediate benefit can be to organisations and the people within those regulated organisations who are actually doing the compliance and the regulatory monitoring roles. And by this, we mean we can give them tools that will make them much more productive, make them much more efficient, help them to surface risks earlier, and get that information in real time, more transparently to the people who need it. That might be the management teams, it could be the boards, and it could ultimately be the shareholders. And this will help people to build a stronger and more sustainable business. So why is RegTech critical for regulated entities? Well, you can see some pretty eye-watering numbers on the top of that slide. The cost of compliance is increasing. The regulatory fines are increasing. And organisations clearly want to mitigate some of this financial risk that they have. And as I've just gone through, it will give greater transparency to boards and management teams. It will deliver superior outcomes for customers and shareholders, and it will help bring and build a stronger business to everyone. But where does Australia play? Well, you can see on this chart that was helpfully compiled by our friends at Boston Consulting Group that, and this was a chart from 2 years ago, but there were roughly about 600 RegTechs globally, but 80 of those are based in Australia. And if you look at the US and UK on this chart, who are clearly world leaders, Australia is punching way above its weight. And so we would say we are the third largest product producer of RegTech in the world right now. So if anyone is looking for RegTech solutions, I would suggest to you that they're all around you right in this country. But if you want to look globally, then there's around 600 to choose from. And arguably, it's probably much more than that as we speak. We did some research late last year, and there was some remarkable results. we were obviously in the eye of the pandemic at the time, but what we were able to pinpoint is that our industry had remained incredibly resilient throughout the pandemic. And this is owing to the fact that the majority of our members are small businesses, and they were simply able to pivot online, go home and do what they could do remotely just as well as they could from an office. We also saw RegTech adding jobs to Australia's economy and in fact to global economies during that time. We also saw increased investor interest into the industry, and more RegTechs were being exposed to sophisticated forms of venture capital and so forth. Over 2/3 of our RegTech also reported strong revenue growth in the last financial year. And importantly, our time to value metrics shortened by 23%. So what does that really mean? Well, it means from first conversation that a RegTech vendor has with an institution to that solution being deployed at that institution, we have shortened that time by 23% over the 2-year period prior, which is very, very positive sign, which means that institutions are consuming RegTech solutions. And whilst the export did have a bit of a bumpy ride throughout the pandemic, as you would expect with the lack of travel and people needing to mobilise, we did see quite a number of interesting new opportunities arise from export destinations that we'd probably not previously considered. And then finally, we saw continued strong growth in terms of full production deployments over the previous 12 months. Now, there's a lot more detail on these 2 slides here, one from a RegTech vendor's perspective and one from a RegTech buyer's perspective, but you will get access to these slides. So I'd just pick out the key point on each of these. So from a RegTech vendor's perspective, the most common challenge right now is procurement, and that is the process that they need to undergo to actually even be onboarded by a large and complex institution. There are a lot of barriers involved in that, and we would like to see that time of procurement reduced significantly. From the buyer's perspective, what's really interesting here is that there's a strong preference from buyers right now, and that's large institutions, towards buying RegTech solutions rather than having a history of building their own, which has certainly been the case in the past. So we are seeing more buy rather than build. And then on the top of that, you can also see the 3 motivating factors behind why regulated institutions are onboarding RegTech, and that is because of regulatory pressure. It's because of their internal digital transformation programs. And as we alluded to earlier, the internal costs are increasing for compliance. So some of the common questions that we get asked is, isn't RegTech the same as FinTech? And isn't it only for financial services? And can you give me some examples of how it's applied elsewhere? So it is not the same as FinTech. In fact, financial technology is usually a disruptor to the traditional and existing banking model. And so therefore, if we could say by and large that FinTechs were in fact regulated institutions, and in many cases they are the same as a financial institution. So therefore, they are customers of RegTech rather than RegTech being a FinTech. And it simply evolved because both were involved in financial services, so it was just simply easy to bundle them together. So is RegTech only for financial services? Well, no, it is not. It can be used in quite an astounding number of different use cases. So you've probably heard it applied in such things as anti-money laundering, of financial crime and regulatory reporting, but it can also be used in such ways as compliance education, verification of information, know your customer, software, product and marketing compliance, workforce management, just to name a few of the different applications. And our directory certainly has more information if you would like to know. But quite astoundingly, also government can be a significant buyer of RegTech solutions. And RegTech has been used in a number of different ways, for example, to enable the regulation of firearms, to reduce harm by police services. RegTech designed to save the lives of families and children in Australia, and that was done through providing secure channels for family and communities and justice systems in the different states of Australia to be able to securely share information. And the police services use very similar RegTech software in order to transmit highly secure information between police forces, as an example. So it can be used in many, many different ways. Well, I hope today has given you a little bit of a whistle-stop tour through RegTech. I want to thank you very much. There is our web address if you'd like to learn more. Our directory is there. Our information hub for our research materials is there. And you can also register for free to all of our events, which are also listed on the website. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Deborah, and the RegTech team for a wonderful presentation. If you want to know more, head to regtech.org.au. I'll also say thank you for allowing UTS startups to be part of this. A lot of the work that we do is trying to amplify important messages so that people that wouldn't normally see them get to see them in spaces like this on the side of the street. This is part of the UTS Startups Festival, where there's a whole bunch of other things going on. If you want to know more, check out the links in the description below. Thanks very much.
Hello, everybody. My name is Deborah Young, and I'm the CEO of the RegTech Association. We are a non-profit industry body committed to accelerating the adoption of RegTech, and we represent about 170 organisations from all around the world. And today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by two of those companies. In turn, I have Antony Quinn from Arctic Intelligence. Welcome, Antony.
Thanks, Deb.
And Evelyn Moore from Green to View. Welcome, Evelyn.
Thank you, Deb.
What I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask both of our fantastic guests a couple of questions, and they're going to share with you some of their insights around those questions. And then once we're finished the questions, we will I'll do a wrap up, and then you will also be able to enjoy my RegTech 101, which will follow straight away. So if I could start with you, Antony, the question is, tell me a little bit about your background and how you found yourself in tech.
Thanks, Deb. Well, I'm English, actually, although you may not be able to tell because I've developed a dodgy Australian accent over the last 20 years. But I started my career working in London for Accelerator in their capital markets practice probably 25 years ago, and spent a lot of time kind of consulting to different investment and retail banks on a whole range of different projects. And I then decided to move to Australia for a gap year, which was 20 years ago, and ended up spending some time running a number of risk and compliance programs for different banks here. So I spent a bit of time at the National Australia Bank, a bit of time at Westpac, and then I spent 9 years at Macquarie Bank. And I was the program director for the anti-money laundering and terrorism financing program for the retail part of Macquarie Bank for about 4.5 years. And then I moved on to their tax evasion compliance program. So that was really kind of what whet my appetite for the financial crime risk management space, which is where the business I set up operates in. And it was really born out of trying to solve a problem that I could see, organisations having in understanding their financial crime risks. So that was really how I got into the tech space in the first place.
Yeah, thanks, Antony. Evelyn, what about you? Your background and how did you find yourself in tech?
Thanks, Deb. Mine was by default. I actually started in the finance sector, and it was in wholesale finance, so in trading. And part of what I found was I became very interested in the processes of making sure it was compliant and risk adverse transactions. And I was very fortunate when I started off that a role arose in Telstra. And they had just acquired a foreign exchange settlement platform. And I joined them as the product manager role because I had an understanding of money markets, not foreign exchange, but in cash. But that didn't seem to matter. So from there, I continued working with Telstra as basically a finance specialist in helping them in their sales organisation before moving to British Telecom, doing a startup in telco called World Exchange, then moving and writing a bid that became PowerTel, where we built a fibre network across the country, and then joining a NASDAQ company called Nice Systems, who specialised in AML and fraud analytics and data analysis, and before starting my own company.
Fantastic. Very rich and diverse experiences that you're bringing. This is what makes my job very rewarding, in that there's such a breadth and depth of experience within our community and our network. Thank you for that. So, Antony, if I could ask you, what is the problem? What's the primary problem that your company solves for? And if you could potentially just give us a bit of an idea about the size and who your typical customer is.
Sure. Well, I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Arctic Intelligence, which stands for Audit, Risk and Compliance Technology Innovation Company. And we essentially specialise in two areas. So enterprise-wide risk assessments and compliance gap assessments, independent audits, in other words. So essentially, for financial crime regulations like anti-money laundering, the onus is put on those regulated businesses that provide different designated services to really identify and assess the types of risks and vulnerabilities that each of those organisations has to financial crime, by virtue of the types of customers they're dealing with, the types of products and services that they're offering them, the types of channels that they're distributing those products to market with, and the geographic footprint. So we have a couple of technology platforms that help organisations to understand their financial crime risks for AML, but also for bribery, corruption, fraud, human and wildlife trafficking. So the types of customers that we have, we've got over 200 customers in about 20 different industry sectors and 12 countries. So we work with some of the banks like Suncorp, Bank of Queensland, ME Bank, quite a number of credit unions, stockbroking firms, insurance companies, fintech businesses, and we work with a lot of partners around the world as well.
Great work. And what about you, Evelyn? The problem that your company is solving,
Okay.
and a little bit about you and your size.
Okay. My company is Green to View. I'm a co-founder. We're an Australian ESG sustainability specialist business. So what we actually do is we help companies manage their ESG performance through data, compliance, reporting across their operations and also their supply chain. So we capture all the emissions and the utilities from their utility types for scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, their diversity ratios, board diversity, workforce injury rates, etc., everything to do with ESG standards. And our platform is aligned to international charters and principles. So we have the capability also to improve our platform and change it dependent on legislation and changes requirement in compliance. We're still a small company. We're just out of, I would say, being a startup, and we have a small group of clients. On average, I'd say we have a medium-sized client in the fast-moving consumer, seems to be very attracted to our products. Also in renewables and also non-for-profit. And they average around 50 million a year in revenue. As far as our company goes, we're only small. As I mentioned, we only have a staff of 5, but we work with contractors and partners in distributing our solutions to the marketplace. And with the changes in government legislation that have come through with the climate change policy, we're getting more and more approaches and attraction to what we're actually doing in helping companies be sustainable, but show their sustainable position. And I think that was it, really.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we do know that ESG is going to be a massive growth area for RegTechs everywhere. I think that there's a great opportunity for RegTech companies to actually think about what their own ESG impacts are as a business themselves. but then there's also about how they are aligning with the customer base and what their customers are thinking about ESG and what targets and goals they have that could be aligned with the different RegTech products and services that are on offer. And then finally, the other big thing I think there is that investors are going to be demanding that all companies have considered ESG if they are wanting to attract professional capital. So there's one last question I've got for you, and it's really the kind of future state, but also to tell us why you think, you know, RegTech is going to be so vital to businesses everywhere. And I guess this speaks to why you're part of the association and why you're proud RegTechers, so to speak. I might start with you, Anthony, given that you have been a foundation member of the association.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the financial crime risk management space in particular, we've seen some massive, compliance failures where we've got, had lots of, money being laundered through a number of major institutions, and that basically is, has a lot of kind of societal impacts in terms of the financial crime landscape. So I think there's a lot of scope for improvement. Obviously, there's a pretty dynamic and changing both risk environment and threat environment. So that there's a lot of organised criminal networks that are moving fast, moving into different products. And obviously that's a challenge for organisations to keep track of. And up to speed really with changing regulations and changing threat landscapes. And so there's definitely a need for better understanding of the financial crime risk exposures. And really, I guess the other thing is that the way in which in our space organisations really assess their risks and then build appropriate and proportionate controls, a lot of that is still done very, very manually on spreadsheets, which if you're kind of a complex business operating across multiple countries or different operating groups or business lines or what have you, makes it very difficult to track, especially in a timely manner. So by the time that the board is presented with those risks, that they may be out of date. And obviously the role that RegTech has to play in that, in terms of digitising the process, putting a lot of kind of workflow and auditability and repeatability around those processes, as well as being able to kind of efficiently kind of analyse data, present it up to boards in real time, is a significant improvement to where things are today. And that's just only going to become more and more evident as organisations, really are challenged by regulators and their boards and their, expectations from society and how they actually manage their kind of risk exposures. And so I think RegTech's got a great role and a great future.
Thanks, Anthony. And what about you, Evelyn?
I think just following on from what Anthony was just speaking about with regard to risk and also past behaviour and so forth of different companies with regard to inappropriate practices and so forth. One of the benefits that I see from RegTech's companies is, without sounding too motherhoody, they actually make or assist companies to be the best they can as far as best practice and to capitalise on that differentiation. So transparency and compliance and risk mitigation leads to a great brand, and enhancing that brand and respect for the brand, which then again leads to investment, both for capital, but for cost of capital, sales growth, employee attraction, and also customer loyalty. And those are real qualifiable dollar values that you can put onto an organisation's bottom line and that boards will listen to. And I think that's, for me, the huge benefit of RegTech organisations, because they bring that to organisations. They're third party, they're independent, and they have great solutions.
That's fantastic. In fact, both of you have just traversed some of the content that I talk about from the more theoretical side of RegTech that will accompany this particular recording that we're doing today. There will be a RegTech 101 as well, and I touch on some of those things. So I'm very grateful to you both for being with us today. Thank you so much for your input. I feel very inspired now. All the best. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Deb.